I decided if somebody picks up the phone, I'm going to get help. For once in my life, I'm just going to go and get help. If I have to leave a message, I'm walking off into the forest. So the phone rang once, and a nurse picked up the phone. And
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Muldowney, aka the Glam Reaper. And on today's episode, I have a dear old friend of mine. I don't say old, I mean in time, Michael from Funeral Professional Peer Support. So I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I know he has some good stories to tell us. And yeah, I'm looking forward to diving in. So, Michael, welcome to the podcast.
well, good afternoon. How are you?
Good. I am good. I'm good. What's been going on? Tell everyone. Most people on here know I've talked about funeral professional peer support a couple of times. And then if they've met me in person, I've definitely mentioned it. But do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what that is to get us started?
Certainly. So about actually 10 years ago, we started Funeral Professional Peer Support. It started here in Ottawa, Ontario, where I live. Started as just kind of a local peer support group for people in the funeral service industry. And with the response from funeral homes in Canada, we realized very quickly that we needed to change our name as we were starting to get requests for peer support groups across the country, and changed it to from Ottawa Funeral Peer Support to Canada Funeral Peer Support. And then, as things happened, then folks in the U.S. heard about us and inquired, and then we changed it to what it is now, Funeral Professional Peer Support. So, I uh, I I basically call it a mental wellness organization for funeral professionals, whether licensed or not.
Yeah, very good. I like it. And I am a part of it along with lots of other people. So you have built
Yes.
quite a network. You are not just in North America, you are global and growing, right?
And that happened because we were having these educational webinars, and we noticed that we had two folks from Kenya who would go on our educational webinars, and then I did a little math and figured out what time it was in Kenya when we were doing this educational webinars, and found out it was 3 o'clock in the morning there. So contacted one of the young ladies, Petite, and we actually started. I think that's about 6 years now in Kenya. So we have a peer support group in Kenya that is going quite strong now.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it just goes, it shouldn't have to be said, but we'll say it that mental health applies to everybody. It doesn't matter where in the world you are or what age or anything like that, because you cover all different cultures, countries, and age groups in the peer support.
And that's really interesting because when I first realized that I was struggling with my own mental health issues, you think you're the only one, and then when you start talking to people, you realize you're not. And the same thing I was going through, others were going through, and not only people around me, but people around the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just on that, do you want to, if you're comfortable, touch on a little bit of your story and
Yeah, I certainly don't mind talking about it. I've always kind of had mental health issues, I guess. As a child, I was sexually abused as a child, and I've heard different people that I truly respect talk about the trauma that happens from that, and when you finally break free of that, what you do is you lock that trauma in a box or in a safe, And then you protect that safe with substance abuse and that sort of thing to kind of hide the problems you were having. And that's certainly something that I did. And I just went about my life and started to work in the funeral profession. And I realized that probably when I started, I guess, when I was in my late 20s, when I became just around 50 or 52, I started to have really bad anxiety attacks. I so bad that I would pass out. I wasn't doing very well at all. Spent most of my time in my room when I wasn't home, and then when I wasn't at home, I wanted to be at home. And it all came to fact about 10 years ago. On January 7th, I decided that that was going to be the day, and I planned it out even before Christmas. Probably about 3 weeks before Christmas, I had planned it all out. I had a location. I knew how, and I did things to protect my family financially. And January 7th, 10 years ago, I woke up like I normally do, kissed my wife goodbye, drove my son to school, and then went off to a park and had my last cigarette and opened the car door and was kind of ready to go off into the forest. And I couldn't get out of my car. And the more I tried, the more I just couldn't get up. It was, and I've said this before, it was kind of like somebody kind of, had their arms kind of wrapped around me, and I could almost hear this voice in my head saying, I've got you. It's going to be okay. Make a call. And, I sat there for a little while and I've often, said those words to people, like, hey, if you're struggling, give me a call anytime at all. So I really wasn't taking the advice that I gave other people. So I decided that I would make a call, and the person I reached out to was my doctor. And I phoned my doctor's office, and I realized through therapy that I chose my doctor because I knew he wasn't going to answer the phone. And so I phoned, and I decided if somebody picks up the phone, I'm going to get help. For once in my life, I'm just going to go and get help. And if I have to leave a message, I'm walking off into the forest. So the phone rang once, and a nurse picked up the phone, and I didn't say anything because when do you ever call your doctor and they ever pick up the phone, right? You're always having to leave a message. I told her I was struggling, and I can hear her going through her book, and she said, "Well, gee, the doctor doesn't have any appointments." This was January 7th, didn't have any appointments till like the 1st of March. And then she said, "Well, I have to ask you this question, unfortunately. Are you suicidal?" And I said, "Well, I have a rope in the trunk of my car." And she put me on hold. And about 2 minutes later, my doctor picked up,
What you want?
and he said, "Where are you?" What's Yeah, I know.
It's like, I'm like, oh God, just one moment, please. And then
Yeah, just hang on.
you know,
So my doctor picked up the phone, and he said, "Where are you?" And I told him where I was, and he said, "Do you need me to call an ambulance? Can you drive on your own?" And I said, "No, I'm fine." And he said, "Okay, I want you to come to my office." He said, "Where are you again?" And I told him. He said, "Okay, I know where that is. That's about a 5-minute drive. If you're not here in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police." So went in. He sent me on. We talked for about an hour. Then he sent me off to do some tests, and I was diagnosed with severe depression and PTSD. And I started to go to. I started when I finally found a therapist, because what happens is, you try and get an appointment with somebody, and they say, "Well, we're only looking after first responders right now. We're only looking after police and fire and military." And I would say to them, I would tell them what I did, and my thought was like, I have PTSD. Does it really matter how I got it? Like,
yeah,
that's one major thing wrong with mental health support is, we don't tell people going for cancer treatment, well, we only look after smokers, so if you have secondhand smoke, you're going to have to wait for chemo. We don't do
Yeah.
that for cancer. Why do we do that for mental health issues?
Yeah.
So, long story short, I went to my therapist, and the first appointment I can remember, I always thought I was going there for my job, right? That's where I thought my problems were, my depression was. And, then she says, okay, we're going to talk about your job in a few appointments, but we really want to talk about, your life, you know, really want to talk about your childhood. And I thought, oh, for God's sake, are we going into my childhood like, no, that's not why I'm here. Anyway, I never talked to anybody about the sexual abuse ever. And one appointment, she got it out of me. And it was, I was, I was angry about something in a newspaper. It said in the newspaper, there's one priest within the Catholic diocese here in Ottawa had many victims, and he did time in jail. He died through suicide. And there was an article in the paper about the fact that the Catholic Church here in Ottawa has paid out over $6 million in restitution to his victims. And I read that, and it was my abuser, and I was angry. And I was angry because all that money could have gone somewhere else. So, to help homeless or, build homes or that sort of thing. So anyway, I go into my appointment. She said, you're agitated. You're upset. What's wrong? I said, no, I'm fine. And she said, no, there's something going on. What's wrong? And I said, well, did you read that thing in the paper about that priest that, that, he abused all those kids, and all that money went to the victims, which I think is great. But, that money could have been used somewhere else. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, doesn't that upset you? And she said, well, does it upset you? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, why? And I gave her the same answer. She said, no, that's not it. And I kind of went, yeah, it is. So she said, no, you tell me what it is. So I just said, well, I just freaking told you, it's because all the money that they've given. She said, no, that's still not it. She says, I want you for once in your life to tell me the truth. And I sat there for the longest time, and I said, for the very first time in my life to anybody, I was abused as a child.
Yeah.
And it was silence in the room, and she said, say that again. And I said, I was sexually abused as a child. And then it was silence again, and she said, okay, who have you told that story to? And I said, no one. And she said, so like I'm the first person? And I said, yeah. So we sat and talked about it, and that's really where my healing started. And then we went into my job. It's been a long road, and it's been happy and upsetting and sad road, but it's been a good road.
Yeah. And this is at what age? This is
The abuse,
well,
or
yeah,
or me
yeah,
saying, oh,
or
okay,
both, I guess,
yeah, yeah. So when am I 60? Well, I'll be 62 this year. So I was 53, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 53, 54.
And the abuse was when you were not
A
in the.
child, yeah. When I was 12. Yeah.
That's a long time to be harboring that.
Yeah, and you know what? I hit it really well.
Yeah.
And again, hit it with alcohol and just really kind of bad behavior, I could never keep a job. Never thought I was really kind of good enough. I had no and I even sometimes, even now, I still struggle with self-confidence, but like I had no confidence in myself. And just yeah, just really not doing very well. I was an awful husband and father and friend and employee until I reached out, until I got the help I needed.
And at 52 years of age, this was your first attempt at suicide, and this was when you got help.
Well, No. Well, no, it wasn't the first attempt. The first attempt was I had decided that I was going to do it one day, and I figured, well, if I'm going to do this, then I'm really going to have to get really drunk. And I ended up getting so drunk I passed out and then forgot to kill myself that day. So, but it's I knew it was the alcohol that day that saved my life.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And it's also, I mean, both situations, it's showing very clearly how the suicidal tendency or the decision really is a matter of moments. How, when you woke up with a hangover, I'm sure after the first time,
Yeah.
you didn't have it as, not that you didn't have it. I mean, you did attempt again, but that
Yeah.
the moment passed. Like it's not like you came to immediately and immediately went to, to try
Yeah.
again. Um,
Mhm.
how long, can I ask, were you in funeral service before the attempt?
Oh, I was well over 25 years probably.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And can I ask what part of funeral service, or what drew you to funeral service? What drew you to this kind of
Well,
chat?
yeah, like a lot of people, this wasn't my first choice. This was actually my second choice. I was in hotels, doing pretty well, and worked for a couple of large major changes chains, and then I decided to to make a change into funeral service, which was always kind of my second choice, I guess, out of high school. But I really found that when I made the move, I found my people. I really connected with them. It was a real family, and a family of people that cared for each other. And maybe I was certainly probably looking for that because I felt kind of so alone.
Yeah.
I realized that after speaking to a few of them and becoming friends, that they were kind of as damaged as I was. The job of looking after people, which really drew me to this. Since we've started this, and I've heard a lot of people talk, and unfortunately, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but it really kind of stopped me in my tracks when I heard this. That he said a high majority of people, and he called them first responder positions, but I call them responder positions because that includes funeral service. A high majority of those people that go into those positions have had childhood trauma or trauma at a young age. That's so true, and that's something that I've actually seen in our profession. As you kind of peel the onion a bit, and you hear about people's issues that they're having, a lot of it has to do with childhood trauma that
Yeah.
they've kept.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not sure whether it was on camera, but I was having a discussion with this or about this with Dwight. I'm pretty sure it was with Dwight. And I'm not sure if we caught it on camera because I often talk off camera to all my guests, as we do. The conversation never ends. Otherwise, these episodes will be hours long. We were actually referencing that where, there is this idea that, because often, people will say, and that I know they have said it to me, like, oh, you're too bubbly to be in this business, or you're too warm, or you're too loving, or you're too this, like as if everybody in this business is cold, and that's the opposite of what I see and I witness. Is there this idea, and not enough research has been done on the funeral profession, never mind our mental health, but that there is a darkness in all of us that is drawn to this dark corner of life, because it really is. It's the end of life. I mean, life is cyclical, and what dies, is reborn in whatever religion or faith or whatever you believe. Whether it's our
Mhm.
body, nature has science has proven that, but that there is a darkness, yeah, within us all, and that has maybe drawn us to it. But I know for me sitting here, I would say, no, I'm totally fine. I had a fine childhood. My parents are amazing and, all of that sort of stuff. But I think if I really sat with it and really delved in, there's a certain darkness that draws you to other people in the profession and this profession. It's very interesting. I mean, I really wish there was more
Yeah.
research on the director's brain. But yeah, I mean, I personally am fascinated with the human brain and what makes each of us tick, and how different we all are, and how dark moments drive us to help others, which is what you have done. I mean, you've in some ways come full circle. Like, you suffered as a child, which, took you through your journey, which, brought you to the forest that day, which now 10 years later, you've got funeral professional peer support where you're helping others and hoping to reach them in their darkest moments. Can I ask you probably a difficult question, Michael? But and always feel free to just not respectfully not answer, obviously. Have you contemplated anything since that time at the forest?
No, no, not to that extreme. I mean, you have down days like everyone else.
Yeah.
I now have the tools
Yeah.
to deal with days where it's pretty tough sometimes to get out of bed. I rely an awful lot on meditation, on hypnosis. I find it really, really grounds me and helps me. I sometimes use hypnosis in the middle of the day when I'm working because I find that it really grounds me. It really helps me. I still occasionally will get an anxiety attack, not as
Yeah.
serious as before because as you can tell, I'm heavily medicated, and you know, and that's the other thing too. I'm not afraid to tell people I'm on medication,
Yeah.
which keeps me calm, which keeps me level. And I certainly don't have those feelings anymore. I do find, when get a I'm kind of hypersensitive to a lot of, let's say, death calls we get, where, somebody is, driven into a rock, or, you know, driven into a bridge and they call it an accident.
Yeah.
I just because of my nature, I kind of wonder sometimes, gee, is that really an accident? You
Yeah.
know, because that's definitely something I've thought about doing in the past,
Wow. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I've had conversations. I think my parents actually really. I mean, we don't have from Ireland where I'm from. We don't have as many main roads as here in the US. I feel like locally
Yeah,
roads here in the US are like our huge motorways. We call them back home.
that's
Or
true. Yeah.
like with 4 lanes and whatever. But I've personally been in 3 car accidents myself. And I've witnessed one, a horrific one back when I was a child. I was only 12, and it was a very interesting scenario, but yeah, a very interesting scenario that I do wonder has impacted me at a later stage. But it I have often wondered, like, people driving cars that end up in these accidents that, like, have driven into other cars or into objects. Is it suicide? Is it a heart attack? Even people
Yeah.
driving planes and things like that, piloting planes, you know, uh, like, how much research, how much of autopsies are done where it's shown that at the last minute. Because when you think about it, a heart attack can happen at any time. It's not to say. And also, just there's that moment that can flash before you to murder people, to drive your car through a load of cyclists or pedestrians and things.
Sure.
People have these dark thoughts and will act on
Yeah.
them, and then all of a sudden it's fatal. And it might have
Mhm.
only been a flash second of a dark thought, but now all of a sudden it's a done deal. Like, what I witnessed when I was a child was just kind of changed the trajectory, I guess, of how I think of things and how when I was in an accident, what happened. It was we were on our way to school, and this man had thrown himself under like a huge truck, a huge lorry. We call them an articulated truck, but like one of those huge, big trucks that are like
Yeah.
car driving whatever cargo and food
Yeah.
stuff. Not a truck, but like a big lorry. And so this guy had cycled alongside of this, and he'd thrown himself under and died. And I
Mm.
remember like traumatized, seeing parts of him all over the road, uh and then seeing the driver's, distraught face and everything, and thinking, oh my God, and he killed this cyclist, etc., etc. Come to learn, and I spent the whole day sort of traumatized by that, but then come to learn that that man had died by suicide. He'd actually thrown himself under the truck, and he had
Yeah.
murdered his wife and his daughter in bed that morning before he'd
Oh
done
my
this.
God.
So, because the immediate reaction was to point the finger at the driver and, oh my God, the poor cyclist, right? And that's all the human reaction, whereas it was actually completely the opposite. And I thought to myself, that driver is traumatized for life. He probably
Totally.
never truck again, and that could have been his livelihood, and might have turned to drink, drugs, and maybe even suicide. Who knows, right? I mean, I would
Sure.
hope,
Yeah.
but just very interesting because it just flipped it on its head for me. And from that day and then the accidents I was in, etc. We don't know what's going on in somebody's brain. We don't know why people make decisions the way they do. We don't know, yeah, the accidents we see happen, are they accidents, and what's behind it? And just, yeah, just so interesting. And I think when you work in this business, you see so much trauma, and you see so much, and it depending on what your own trauma is and what you have experienced in life, I think can flavor, yeah, how you deal with families and
Yeah,
yeah.
and you talk about what we experience, what we see, what the trauma we see, and one thing that the other responder groups, the police and fire and paramedics have done really well is they've informed the general public. Hey, you know what? This is what we're dealing with. These are the scenes we go into. This is the trauma that we're dealing with. We as an industry have never done that. When I've gone on, these type of shows and mainstream media interviews, and I tell the interviewer kind of, you know, what we do, like a lot of the general public is under the impression that, if there's a murder or a car accident or, a deceased is found somewhere, it's the paramedics, it's the police that do that. You watch CSI, whatever, and it's the police, right? That take the deceased away when people don't realize it's us.
Yeah.
It's people in the funeral industry, and especially if you work in a small town, you'll respond to a murder scene or a suicide or a car accident, and the likelihood of that family choosing your funeral home in that small town is
Yeah.
probably about 90%. So the difference with us and the other responders is that they go in, they look after the scene, they look after the deceased, do what they need to do, and then they go away. We go into that scene, look after the deceased, and then if your funeral home, let's say, gets the call from the family, then you get that body back. Now, you're not only dealing with that deceased, but you're also dealing with a spouse, children, parents, uncles, aunts, friends. So you're reliving that all over again.
Yeah.
The general public's not aware of that, and we don't kind of make that known.
Well, and one other thing that I think is hugely important and overlooked, that I know I learned and was flabbergasted when it was said to me, that I thought, holy crap, I never even thought that somebody had to deal with that, or that that was a thing, is, as you just said, is a car accident, absolutely, and stuff like that, but is also things as huge as 9/11.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
with
totally.
actors that had to go, and they had parts of people
Yeah.
pallets of people. And they had to, they were part of helping find the families and identifying them. And, that they went to pick up these remains. But also the evil people of the world, like the person
Right.
who sexually abused you. I mean, if your funeral home had gotten called to take care of his body once he was
Yeah.
deceased, that's further trauma for you.
Oh,
In how
totally. Totally.
school shooters, there
Yeah.
was an interview just recently about, or it's a documentary I think that's just been released, about being the parent of a murderer. But also the same thing applies for a funeral home. The funeral home, especially if it's a local funeral home in a community, a small community, they might be taking care of 4 out of the 10 deceased children from a school shooting, but all of a sudden now
Mhm.
they're taking care of the shooter. I mean,
Yes.
that is a whole other level of professionalism, of trauma, of, they talk about it because the same thing happens in a hospital. If you've got the school shooter has gotten wounded for whatever reason, and now he's been brought in, and we see this on shows and series that show us this, we'll just let him die. They're having this whole
Yeah.
argument, political argument.
Yeah.
Obviously it's dramatized and stuff, but the same thing should we save his life, should we let him die, whatever. But the
Yeah.
same thing applies to the funeral business, like um Jeffrey Epstein. Campbell's was named
Yep.
in the Epstein files because Campbell's took care of the body, right? Like,
Mhm.
that has to impact.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because we here in Ottawa many years ago we had a mass shooting. 6 people died at a bus company, and the shooter went in there one day, and the funeral home that I was working for, it was an SCI firm. We looked after the shooter, and everybody kind of in the city, it was kind of a negative feeling obviously towards the shooter, and I have to admit, I probably had that too until I met his mother,
Mm.
until I met his family,
Yeah.
and until I heard his story. I mean, he was a guy that he stuttered really bad. He was bullied at work, lost his cool, then he lost his job, and he went off to Vegas, and I guess gambled his money away and drove back to Ottawa. Well, that drive from Vegas to like, and I did this in a speech where I used the timeline. I said, that drive from Las Vegas to Ottawa is a pretty long drive, and there's a lot of opportunity to think how the world has done you wrong, right? So he arrives home. Where does he go? He goes to mom and dad's house. Mom and dad aren't home because I think it was in around the Easter weekend they were away for Easter, and so mom and dad aren't home. That's the first person he goes to see is his parents. And he grabs his gun, goes into work. There's this mass shooting, and the grief on that mother's face when, and we even heard her say, "If only I was at home,
Yeah.
I could have stopped him." And that woman, that poor woman, probably had to. Well, she did lived with that for the rest of her life. But my whole attitude changed when I met her, when I heard her talk, when I saw the grief on her face, that,
Yeah.
to realize that whatever this man did, obviously we don't condone it. There is a story behind it. The end of the day, this man, like other shooters, have mums and dads,
Yeah.
kids,
We're all a
maybe.
child of somebody. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that totally changed the way I dealt with that and I felt that so much so that we had a terrorist attack here in Ottawa, and the funeral home I was working at, we were watching it on the news, and the funeral director was a young student. She says, "What are we going to do, if we get the call for the shooter because he was killed by the police?" And I said, "I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're gonna treat that man with the same respect we give all those deceased in our prep room, because at the end of the day, that person was loved by somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And even that in and of itself though, Michael, is such a, I don't want to say a traumatic thing, but it is such a weight to carry, you know?
Yeah.
It's compassion 100%, but it is also, it is also a secret maybe, it might not be something that you announce. I mean, I know Campbell's didn't advertise that they had Jeffrey Epstein when they had him,
Yeah.
and but then the files came out, and it's open for everything and everyone to see. So if you're the funeral director who took care of that, do you hold, is there, and people will attach things, and that's the thing. There's a lot of scary people in the world who do form kind of attachments to, oh well, you took care of such and such. I mean, I remember bin Laden, I think, he got his final burial was out in the middle of the ocean somewhere, because they
Yeah.
were afraid what people would do and supporters would do, if he had a burial spot. So fascinating to have to think of all these things, but again, back to all of this trauma and all of this dark corner of the universe is held by funeral professionals who have to take care of themselves while taking care of others. And so many of them right now are going through burnout. I'm going on my travels to Europe next month, but I've witnessed it in my own country in Ireland. I'm witnessing it here in the US. And I think something
Mhm.
like professional peer support that you've built through your own trauma is massively helpful. I just wish more people knew about it. I wish more people would participate. But there is
Yeah.
that burden of, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to tell anyone.
Yeah, and a lot of that is kind of with this generation. Let's say your funeral director. I call them my generation, probably the generation that is close to retirement than really starting. Because I find an awful lot of the students, and well, actually, we have a peer support meeting tonight for students, people entering their careers. Mental wellness is so important when they go looking for a job. Yeah.
Uh,
It's we as an organization, just very quickly, we you talked about doing research on the brain of a funeral director. That's something that kind of is in the works a little bit with us, with schools in the States, or we need to do that research, as we've done research on the brain of a police officer, the brain of you know athletes. Find out, first of all, why we're in this industry, what is happening to us in this industry. Our uh, one area which I'm really excited about is, we don't have enough professional therapists who just that deal with funeral service, and that's a big issue when you're looking for a professional therapist. That a lot of them don't have a background in funeral service, don't understand funeral service.
yeah,
The answer you get from some therapists is, well, why don't you quit your job? Well, that's really great in a great job market, but if the job market's not that good, you can't quit. So now what we're doing, we have a program that's put together by Dwight Thompson. You mentioned him. It's
yeah,
last responder training, which
yeah,
is going to be September 30th. It's a 1 day course for mental health professionals to get basically certified in helping people in our profession. And what we want to do is make sure, that we're going to start here in Canada, but make sure that there's a qualified therapist in every province in Canada, and hopefully soon in every state in the United States, that we can call upon when people call upon us, which they do,
yeah,
through
yeah,
our helpline, our 24-hour helpline that we have. We have our regular peer support meeting. That's the third Tuesday of every month. And of course, we have our Lifting the Burden educational webinar that's coming up in October. But there's, still more to be done, because in this industry, a lot like the other responder professions, We're almost taught to, deal with what we're dealing with, but not only deal with it, thrive in it, you
Yes.
know, you know, and if you're not if you're not thriving, then you're considered a jerk,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And there's something wrong with you as opposed to the system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, so we're pretty excited about our future. I think
Yeah.
in time people will know more about us. We're slowly kind of making inroads. And I know any change that has ever come to this world is not come automatically, right? It takes a
Yeah.
long time.
Does take a
Yeah.
long time. It does take a long time. Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us, Michael. This has been a wonderful episode. I would ask everybody to check out Funeral Professional Peer Support. We're going to leave all the links and everything for everyone. Check out the events, the peer support meetings that are happening. Everything's on the website. And
And our
yeah,
podcast.
yes, absolutely. You also have a rival. No, I'm joking. You have a podcast. But yeah, check out all of the resources and just support. Show up, and whether you're suffering with your mental health or not. I just think it's a great group. So thank you for
Thank you.
joining us.
Thank you.